Hey, Brendan here from Blue Light, and for those of you who haven't seen any of my videos before, over the past 5 years I've been coaching and supporting people to succeed in the police recruitment process. And so I've become quite knowledgeable about how the assessment centres work, how police forces carry out their recruitment, and how there's 43 different Home Office ways of recruiting people into what essentially is the same job. But hey, that's the police. So today, a very special video. Something really bizarre has been happening at the Westshire Centre. Actually, for those of you who know that you're going to the assessment centre, you'll know you're going to be assessed in role plays and a written exercise that surround a shopping centre that doesn't exist at the Westshire Centre. Now, in between all the exercises at the assessment centre, you will have some time where you'll be able to sit with your syndicate and wait for the next exercise. Now, you'll have been told prior to starting the whole of the assessment centre, things like notes aren't allowed, mobile phones aren't allowed, any kind of watches which can display messages or send messages aren't allowed. And you'll already be aware that you shouldn't be disclosing, if you've been to the assessment centre before, the contents of the assessment centre because you've signed a confidentiality agreement. You'll also be acutely aware that you're going to be assessed to be a police officer, so the code of ethics applies. So you should demonstrate respect for others and you should behave in a way which is expected of a police officer. Now, those are some givens really, with a few rules that you probably didn't know before you went to the assessment centre. So one of the weird things that's been happening over the past few months is I've been getting reports back from my clients, and they are numerous. They go into the hundreds at any one time, the several hundreds at any one time. So they're not breaching any confidentiality here because they're not telling me what happened at the assessment centre in terms of the exercises. But what they are telling me is about some very odd, bizarre and weird behaviour demonstrated by only one person in their syndicate. And all of these reports are coming from assessment centres that are being run by police forces on behalf of the College of Policing. So it's not coming from assessment centres run at places like Ryton in Coventry, which is a College of Policing establishment. And these reports really are bizarre, and it leads me to believe, well, part of me is believing that there might be a mole being inserted by some forces into the syndicate. For what reason, I don't know. I can only guess it might be to test your ethical stance or to test whether you will challenge behaviour which is clearly inappropriate. So if I give you some examples of sort of things I'm hearing of, we've got candidates who suddenly start swearing and being abusive about the assessment centre staff, quite openly, not hiding it, and without any reason, just being abusive about assessment centre staff. We've got candidates who are being abusive about the police. On one occasion, I've heard of one individual talking about how he's suing the police at the moment, and they're all some swear words. I've heard of people getting their phones out in front of syndicate staff. So in front of members of staff, they're getting their phones out and checking messages. One occasion, one individual said, "Do you want to use my phone to contact anyone?" People who are openly saying that they've been to the assessment centre before, and would you like to know what the role plays are about? Or I know what the questions are going to be at the interview. Do you want to know? Other individuals who are saying, "Oh, you've been to the interview part. What are the questions that are being asked?" So some really quite obvious and bizarre behaviour, which leads me to believe, because it's coming from several force areas, that these individual forces might be putting someone into the group. I don't know for certain, but it's just all far too bizarre. The behaviour is extremely, extremely bizarre. And it doesn't sound like one-offs. It sounds like this is happening time and time again. Now, I'm not going to mention the forces where this is coming from, because I've been assured by people who come from that world, the assessment world, in the policing world, that this sort of behaviour would not be tolerated by the College of Policing. The College of Policing would not sanction it, they wouldn't approve it, and in their force, this most definitely wouldn't happen. But that's not to say that in the other forces it would happen, because police forces and individuals within police forces have been known to do some very bizarre things over the years. If we look at some of the scandals that, when you think about them, you think, what on earth were they thinking about? Undercover officers taking on the identities of dead children. From years and years ago, a certain force, because before the assessment centre, before the National Assessment Centre, they couldn't get people from ethnic backgrounds to come and do role plays for them as part of their own assessment centre to join the police. And so they got police officers to black their faces up to pretend to be black. What were they thinking? So if you look back over recent years and previous years, you'll see that every now and then some individuals in a certain force do some extraordinary bizarre things. And I wouldn't put it past some individuals in a certain force to do some extraordinarily bizarre things, like put a mole into the group. So I'm not saying I'm absolutely convinced it's happening. I'm just saying I think it's more likely than not that some forces might be playing sort of head games with you to see how you react. Now, I'm reliably informed by assessment centre staff that if any of those behaviours were seen and witnessed by syndicate staff, they would be addressed, and that the individuals concerned would more than likely fail the assessment centre because of their behaviour. But what I'm also hearing is that it's within sight and hearing of assessment centre staff and they're not doing anything, which for me is bizarre, because I would have thought there'd be a bit of a duty to challenge that kind of behaviour if it was within a candidate. Or perhaps they're just waiting to discuss it later on, and then they're going to fail that individual because of their behaviour. Now, whether these are moles, whether these are individuals who have been planted there by a police force assessment team, or whether it's just coincidental, and out of the hundreds of clients I've got, there's bound to be hundreds of clients going to hundreds of assessment centres across the country, where every now and then someone is going to act in a very bizarre way. I mean, chances are that might happen because people are bizarre and they do odd things. So if you go to an assessment centre in the future and that happens to you, say you're sat next to someone who starts getting their phone out and starts scrolling through messages, when you know at the very beginning of the assessment centre everyone has been briefed to say that the use of phones is not allowed, what are you going to do? Now, this is ethical crunch time now, because you could choose to ignore it, but the syndicate staff may see you choosing to ignore it, choosing to ignore one of the rules, one of the policies set down by the police. Do you not think that might be grounds for failure? Or someone next to you is swearing away and you get involved in a conversation with them and you get drawn into it, and before you know it, you're swearing as well. Grounds for you to be failed as well as the individual concerned. Or they start engaging in a conversation with you, saying that they've been to the assessment centre before and they know what the interview questions are going to be. And you just happen to say, without thinking about it, oh, that's interesting, I wonder what they might be. And they tell you. Then I would say that's grounds for you to be failed too. So what I'm advising my clients at the moment is behave exactly as you would in one of the role plays. So if one of the role plays did something odd and bizarre and inappropriate in one of the role plays, you'd challenge it, and you know how to challenge it. If you're one of my clients, you know exactly how to challenge any inappropriate behaviour as per the West Shire Centre pack. Now, the West Shire Centre pack just so happens to have a really good way of challenging inappropriate behaviour in there that would work in the real world, not just West Shire Centre world. So you know exactly how to challenge people. You've got the CUDSA model in your back pocket. You know exactly how to confront behaviour which isn't acceptable. So you know how to deal with this. So what I'm telling my clients now is, if someone does behave like that, even if it's in front of syndicate staff, even if it's in front of the assessment centre staff, challenge it and bring it to the attention of the member of staff who's conducting the assessment centre. Maybe they've not noticed it, or maybe they have noticed it, and they're just waiting to see what you do. Or maybe they have noticed it, but they don't want to disturb the flow of the day, so they're going to report it to the assessment centre manager later, who will fail the individual concerned, and may fail you if you get drawn into it. At one of my seminars a few years ago, during the break time, one individual started talking about how they believe that positive action is actually positive discrimination and is really unfair. I started using a language like, why should they have an advantage over us? They and us. And the language, before I knew it, by the whole group, started to turn into something which I thought was actually quite discriminatory. And we discussed it after, and what they all said was it was so easy to get drawn into that conversation. The person concerned who had the rather extreme views wasn't for changing their mind. We did have a chat later about whether, if they're going to have that kind of mindset, whether being a police officer was a good career for them or not. So it's that easy to get drawn in. So my advice is, again, challenge it. If you're one of my clients, you know exactly how to challenge that kind of behaviour. Bring it to the assessment centre staff and you will be sound. You've got nothing to worry about. Quite a few of my clients who've been to the assessment centre have said that they witnessed this kind of behaviour, have said that they've actually just kept themselves to themselves and not said anything whatsoever. And they've passed. So that option also remains for you as well. Just don't get drawn in. Whatever you do, don't get drawn in. There's no harm at all in challenging it, telling the individual that their behaviour needs to stop and then reporting it to one of the assessment centre staff. It's what would be expected of you as a police officer. So there you go. It's not conclusive. I'm not absolutely convinced that some forces are putting in a mole or a plant into the syndicates at the assessment centre, but due to the weight and the number of reports I'm getting from clients about extreme, bizarre, weird behaviour, what I'm now doing, I'm not sitting on the fence anymore. I'm now saying that I believe it's more likely than not. The problem is, if it's ever discovered, this isn't something that's ever going to go public. If it's discovered, I think what will happen is the College of Policing will intervene as part of their quality assurance process. The force will be put under some kind of observations by the College of Policing and monitoring. There'll be some kind of warning or something like that, and it'll never go public, so we'll never find out. So there you go. More likely than not is what I'm saying at the moment, but who knows? But whether it is the case that you've got a plant in there in the future, or someone who's been put there as a mole in your syndicate, or it's just someone who just should never be in the police force because they're just bizarre in the way they behave and they're behaving inappropriately there, so what they're going to be like when they're a police officer, doesn't matter. Your role is to challenge that behaviour. So I hope you found this useful. It's one of the most bizarre things I've heard of so far coming from my clients. They'll never tell me what happened at the assessment centre in terms of the exercises or the questions or the role plays, and nor would I ever ask. But I don't believe them sharing this with me is unethical in any shape or form whatsoever. It's just interesting. It's just a bit odd. I don't know. What do you think? If you've got a view on this, let me know in the comments box below if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube. Comments box below. And if you did like this video and you're watching this on Facebook, then like my page, like this video. I'll send you an invite to come and join my Facebook support group. It's a secret one, so you can't find it, you can't see it, you can't see who the members are, and you can't see what the posts are unless you're invited. So I'll be able to drop you an invite. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please do subscribe and you'll be invited to join any new videos in the future. It'll drop into your email queue as soon as I press the Go Public button on YouTube. So until next time, hopefully with something a little bit more constructive and less bizarre, I shall see you soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.